All right, hello everyone. So we're working on today the midpoint and the distance, and then at the end of class today, you're going to take an exit ticket, just making sure you're keeping up on the beginning ideas in chapter 4. So first thing I want to cover is just trying to find the midpoint between 2 points. This is what we did last class. So if I have two different points and I'm using GeoGebra today, if I had two different points, like let's say A is the point 3 comma 4, there's A, and B can be the point -1 comma -4. There we go. We can find the midpoint between them. I think GeoGebra actually has a pretty nice little thing here. So I can click, and it tells me the midpoint is right there. And so you can see visually that that is right in between my two uh, dots. So if I connected them like this, you can see visually that that's right in the middle. The nice thing about using GeoGebra is that I can go and kind of adjust those coordinates, and it should move the point C along with me. So I'm going to erase my coloring so it doesn't um, screw up. But we can move this point to, say, make the A value a -3, and it adjusts the midpoint with it. I can change the B value. Let's make this a negative, or let's make it a +9. Oh, now it's off the screen, but I can zoom out and you can see that. And so that's kind of nice. And so you can also notice that it just tells you right over here what the coordinates are for the C value. And so what you did last class was you had this idea that you could think of it like a right triangle here, and you could find what halfway on the x coordinate is and what halfway between the y coordinates is, and that'll give you the midpoint. And the way many of you approached it was by subtracting your two x coordinates and subtracting your two y coordinates and then cutting that distance in half. But it turns out that that gives you the same answer as if you did x1 plus x2 divided by 2. In other words, you found the average of the x coordinates. And over here you do y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And that gives you the midpoint. And so if I have my x1 and x2, I can just do -3 plus -1. That gives me -4. Divide that by 2. I get -2, and that checks out with what GeoGebra is saying. Same idea for the y coordinates. 4 plus 9 gives me 13. Divide that by 2, and I get 6.5, and that checks out right there. Then I'm going to switch over to three-dimensional here. And it's basically the same idea. So if we have a 3D calculator, we do the same thing. Let's give A a point -359. There's point A kind of floating up here. It can be a point B, some other coordinates. Let's say 2, 2, 1, -3. There's point B down there. We should be able to, just like before, let me zoom out a tiny bit, just like before, find the midpoint between them. Maybe this one doesn't allow you to make the midpoint. So I'll have to construct the midpoint by hand then. So my midpoint will just be the same idea that I had just on the last screen. My x coordinates over to my y coordinates over to, and then my z coordinates over to. So what do we get? Let's look at the x coordinates. So we do -3 plus 2. The y coordinates, 5 plus 1. And the z coordinates, 9 plus -3. So that gives me -1/2, 6 halves, and another 6 halves. So I'm going to type in negative 0.5 comma 3 comma 3, and that should end up being directly halfway in between. So let's see if I did my addition correctly. Negative 0.5 comma 3 comma 3. And that looks like it's halfway in between. So we should be able to, no matter how I rotate my view, it looks like the midpoint is staying exactly halfway between the A value and the B value. Okay? So that's the idea with midpoint. The other thing you're working on then is the distance between 2 points. And so the distance between 2 points comes back to that idea of a right triangle. If you have a right triangle, ooh, that's kind of cool, I can move it around. If you have a right triangle, you can connect your two dots like this, and to find the distance of the hypotenuse, you're just going to use your good old friend a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If we want to solve for the distance, that's the letter c, and so that means the letter c is just the square root of a squared plus b squared. Well, how do you find a? Well, a is the difference between the x coordinates. It's how far apart your x coordinates are. So a is just your second x coordinate minus your first x coordinate. So a squared means you subtract them first and then you square them. Don't worry about which one you call x1 and which one you call x2. You'll get the same answer after you square it, whether you subtract them in either order. Same idea for b. B is just the difference between your y coordinates. So y2 minus y1 squared, and that'll give you the distance between the 2 points. If we switch over back one more time, switch back over to 3D, we have to just draw a slightly more complicated triangle. Our triangle here still connects the 2 points A and B. So let's draw that. Connects A and B. But remember, when we were doing our rectangular prism ideas, what we did is, we said this represents one diagonal along the bottom, and then this represents the height of the rectangular prism right there. And this distance right here we just found on the last screen was x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. That's exactly like we did when we did our rectangular prisms. And this distance over here is z2 minus z1. So the distance we actually care about, which we used as big D last unit, is just adding up all of those pieces. x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared plus z2 minus z1 squared. So for this example here, I would just do 2 minus negative 3 squared. So I'm taking my second x value minus my first x value plus 1 minus 5 squared, second y value minus first y value, plus negative 3 minus 9 squared, second z value minus first z value. And so I get 5 squared plus 4 squared plus negative 12 squared. So this was a negative 4, negative 4 squared, and then negative 12 squared. So my distance is the square root of 25 plus 16 plus 144. So what does that pop out to be? So this makes 150, 160. So square root of 185 is the distance between those 2 points. So that's it. So you're going to work through some problems today, and you will have an exit ticket at the end. So please reach out with any questions or concerns.